Here in Ireland, it may be assumed that because we're an island washed with plenty of rainfall, that our water is abundant and pristine. Unfortunately, this is often not the case. There are many pressures affecting our water quality, which if not addressed now, could cost billions to repair in the future.
We've got 50% of our rivers and streams at risk.
A significant amount of investment still needs to take place in Ireland to provide the water services that we need.
As impacts on water in Ireland have been steadily increasing, our water quality has been quietly but readily decreasing. Last year, nearly 70,000 people were affected by boil water and restricted water use notices. There are only 9 designated blue flag status areas for bathing in our total freshwater lakes. We suffer regular water shortages. Last year, nearly every county was affected at some point. And the recent frost damage during last winter left thousands without water for days on end. The European Court of Justice ruled against Ireland for insufficient inspection of all on-site wastewater treatment systems, which are mostly septic tanks. We could be facing huge fines if we continue to be in breach. The EU have also issued a directive to all member states to achieve high water quality status by 2015. With the slow rate of remedial action by Ireland, it's hard to see us meeting this target. So what's causing this? How do we address it? How much will it cost? And where will the money come from? EcoEye has been reporting on Ireland's water for over 10 years. This year, we've decided to bring together all our research and information and put it together into one episode to tackle these questions. I'm going on a journey around Ireland to see the full extent of these water problems. I want to see what solutions are out there and learn what we can do now without breaking the bank on an already troubled economy. We source our freshwater supply from the river catchments around the country. Rainwater soaks into the soil, percolates underground, funnels through our streams, rivers and lakes, and collects in the basins of our river catchments. This water replenishes our reservoirs where it's abstracted for human use. As the water from the catchments travels downstream from the headwaters to the rivers, lakes and estuaries, it encounters many environmental factors that determine the standard of our water quality. My first port of call is to visit the upland headwaters of our catchments, where our water supplies should be at their purest. It's in these areas, where human impacts are scarce, that we find the cleanest water. I'm being shown around the Connemara catchments just outside Oughterard in Galway by Dr. Martin McGarrigle of the EPA. Martin is one of Ireland's leading water quality experts and has been advising us for the last decade on all aspects of water in Ireland.
So we're basically trying to kick up. Okay, we're on the Glengall Beg. It's an upper tributary of the Owenriff River that flows down into Oughterard. It's a headland stream, and we're very concerned about a lot of these headland rivers because they're coming under pressure. They should be the best quality of the lot, really, but we've been losing them, and we're very concerned to protect the high status ones because we don't have that many of them, and across Europe there's not that many of them either, so these are really important.
The quality status of Ireland's headwaters was amongst the highest in Europe, but this quality has been reducing in recent years. A good indicator of this is the decline of the Irish freshwater pearl mussel, which acts as a natural water filter. Unfortunately, with reducing high water quality status, these protected pearl mussels are now seriously threatened with extinction.
So what are the main environmental pressures on the river up here?
Okay, the main pressures that would be the forestry, peat cutting, turf cutting, silt coming from that. And there's some low-intensity agriculture as well. Sheep overgrazing was a big issue in the uplands in the 90s especially. It's coming back under control gradually. And then even the smallest pressure really can have an effect on the quality of the river and especially the ecology.
Headwaters are very sensitive to impacts from farm animals, forestry and peat harvesting, causing acidification and siltation. Phosphate and nitrate runoff causes excessive growth of algae and reduced oxygen to ecosystems.
Just keep that.
So you have your on the top there's quite a bit of algae on that one. Like, it's not.
Okay.
It shouldn't.
That shouldn't be there.
Shouldn't be there. This should be perfectly clean, really.
Right. Okay. So that algae sign, that's a sign of what?
Sign of nutrients coming down from the upper catchment, and in this case, it's probably the forestry.
Biological sampling is a very accurate predictor of water quality.
Okay.
Martin can test this by examining the insect and invertebrate life in the water. There's a delicate living ecosystem in this water comprising of over 150 different types of insects and invertebrates. And each of these species is sensitive to certain types of water pollution. So, depending on what type of animal life we find in the water and what ones are missing, Martin can grade very accurately the quality of the water and what contaminants are affecting it.
No, there's a stonefly there.
That's a stonefly. And
There's
he's
a
only got two tails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's little caddis flies there. They're filter feeders. They usually get them below lakes. Yeah.
And what's this fella here? See this
And then
fella?
that's a nice mayfly. It's called Ectonurus.
That's a mayfly.
That's the most common one in rivers.
So the variety of species that you're finding here, how important are they in identifying the quality of the water?
So, I mean, some of them are quite tolerant of pollution, but we've got a good few, like the mayflies, they're quite sensitive. If we don't get them, we would rate the river down.
So generally what now from the sample you've got here, what is it telling us about this?
Yeah, well, it's telling us that it's probably nicely oxygenated, and, you know, there's a good few of the sensitive species there. It's probably what we would call a Q4, but there's too much algae in it, so it's a sign that there's a lot of nutrients coming down the system. So it's not as good as it should be for a place like this.
Martin has taken me further up the source of the headwaters of the Owen Riff River in search of the contaminants that we discovered in the river further downstream.
So Martin, where are we here now? What's this lake?
This is Lettercroft Row. It's up at the top of the Owen Riff system.
So what are your concerns up here in the headwaters?
The problem really is that there's no minerals in the soils here. It's just deep peat. So the nutrients that are released from the trees when they cut them go straight into the water. And the trouble is there's a lot of this kind of forest on deep peat that's planted, 40 years ago and into the future. There's a lot of it that has to be dealt with. And we're up at the headwaters and we're talking about, protecting high status stuff. And if you get 2 or 3 kilos of phosphorus per hectare coming off this kind of land once the trees are cut, that's as much as intensive farmland. It's a lot of nutrients. So it's a real issue that has to be dealt with.
Forestry is good for our environment and should be encouraged. It's critical to choose the right mix of tree species and plant in the right soils, away from acid-sensitive rivers, excessive use of fertiliser on young plantations, and unstructured digging, draining and harvesting of mature trees significantly contributes to water contamination. When large tracts of forest are removed close to rivers, the nutrients and chemicals stored in conifer needles are suddenly released into the rivers and lakes. This can be solved by careful planning.
So the solution for this situation is to have a buffer, cut a narrower strip first along the edge of the lake and then let it revegetate for a number of years, and then they can cut the further back up trees at that stage so that it'll act as a filter for the nutrients coming down. And this is probably what they'll have to do in most of these upland deep peat forests around lakes especially, but near rivers as well.
These improved practices are now in place in Ireland, particularly in our state forests. We now need to encourage private forestry to adopt similar methods. As rivers progress downstream towards more populated areas, we usually encounter more serious contamination, and often within short distances. Just 2 miles further down the Owenriff River, I'm meeting with local angler John Gibbons, who's been monitoring these waters for over 30 years. If there's a man who knows this river from source to where it meets Lough Corrib, it's John. He grew up close to this river and has been fishing it for over 5 decades.
Besides being an angler, you're a local in this area. What sort of pressures have you seen on the water?
Well, we have 4 main issues in the hinterland here. I suppose the biggest one on the western side of Corrib, and that's all along the western side, it says blanket peatland in it, is forestation. The second one would be the town sewage, which is going out of the Uachtaráir town into the river down here, primary treatment only. Then you have agriculture, and then after that you have the rural septic tanks, and if it's not done adequately or properly, you have problems from that.
So you mentioned forestry was an issue here for the river. Tell us about the problem.
The die was cast for this river, I reckon, in the late 50s, early 1960s, when I suppose government have decided that they'd use the blanket bog for coniferous afforestation. From once you do clear felling and disturb the peatlands when the trees are mature, as you know, if you look in, it's like an atom bomb hit the area when they come in with their big machinery harvesters and their stuff moving the trees out. Everything is disturbed. And we've done some tests on the river, I say, over the years. We're not scientists, we're just ordinary anglers. But the results we got back were absolutely alarming. The background levels of nutrients and everything in this river are just totally off the wall. They shouldn't be there. 2004, we had a massive algae bloom all along this river, wading in something like just like going into a slurry pit, all the way to the lake, right down into the Corrib.
Badly planned forestry is only a small part of the problem. Up to now, agriculture has been assessed as the largest contributor to water pollution. Steps are now being taken to address this issue. The Nitrates Directive, for example, encourages sustainable practices such as slurry storage tanks and reduced use of nitrogen fertiliser by planting clover in grass swards. This facilitates productive farming practice while protecting our river catchments. We'll look at this subject in a later programme. Aside from agriculture, domestic septic tanks and outdated wastewater treatment plants are a pressing issue, because they often release semi-treated sewage into our natural water systems. Uachtaráir Wastewater Treatment Plant is an example of this. It's a primary treatment plant, which means that it only treats the water with one stage of purification before it discharges into the river. To meet EU directives, all wastewater treatment plants must now achieve a minimum standard in biological treatment and purification before being returned to our rivers and lakes.
They have been 30 years campaigning to have a sewage works here, a new sewage work put in, because it's only primary treatment and all the water is released out into this river just a mile from where we're standing now. And this is a source of drinking water, as we all know, for Galway and the hinterland. 25 years ago, I had ministers here saying that we'd have a new one by 2005. We're at the end of 2010, and we're still 2 years away from a plant. So I don't know, I'm sceptical to think will we ever see it, but I'm hoping we will.